Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to be creating a look focusing on the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk collection. Are they worth the hype and are they worth your money? Let's get into creating this look. I am in a really good mood today. To start off with primer, I am going to use the mini size of the Smashbox Photo Finish Primerizer Plus Hydrating Primer. Charlotte Tilbury does have a primer in her range. I think it's like Wonder Glow or something like that. The main priming step is the Magic Cream, and I believe there's also like a Magic Cream Light or a lotion. I used to use Magic Cream a lot on clients when I worked at Nordstrom, especially for mature, dry skin or people with dehydrated skin. A really lovely priming moisturizer. Also has a little bit of an SPF. It's like an SPF 15 or 20 if I'm not mistaken. In my mind, it was pretty interchangeable with Bobbi Brown Vitamin Rich face base. Also similar to the Bobbi Brown Vitamin Rich eye base, Charlotte Tilbury has a magic cream for eyes. That was something I loved about working at Nordstrom. I was able to really use all the brands as I was not placed with a singular brand. Charlotte Tilbury, up until that point, was something that I hadn't really had a lot of exposure to outside of seeing it in YouTube videos. Charlotte Tilbury and Sicily were the two brands I used the most on clients when I first started at Nordstrom, and it was so much fun. I am just applying a little bit of a liquid illuminator. I'm gonna blend this side out and we'll talk about this. As far as liquid illuminators, especially for pre-foundation, a lot of people are familiar with the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. Early on in my channel, I still had a bottle that was my second or third bottle, shade 2, then shade 1, and either way, shade 1 or shade 2, I could both make them work. But as I improved my skincare routine and worked on evening out my skin tone, shade 2 became too dark and too golden for my skin tone, and I just never got around to purchasing shade 1 again. Other products came out like the one I'm using today, which is the Auric Glow Lust. I use this in a lot of videos because a little bit goes a long way. And the shade I have is the most recent formula of Morganite. It's a really nice pink beige with more of a neutral leaning cool undertone that works really well for my skin tone because my skin tone is more on the cool neutral side. Anything too warm, too yellow appears very out of place and out of context. Under foundation, like I would use the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Filter for, it was a little bit easier to get away with, but when I put something too warm, yellow, golden on top of foundation, it gets a little funny looking. So the next step in a makeup routine for the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk look would be applying my complexion products or foundation product. I do not have any Charlotte Tilbury foundations. When I was at Nordstrom, I received 2 of the Charlotte Tilbury foundations as gratis. So I received the original foundation, which was called the Light Wonder Thin Watery Foundation. Texture was very reminiscent of the MAC Face and Body. However, when you blend it down, it didn't have that slip film former, which gave it a little bit more of a grip. And then there was, I think it was like Airbrush Flawless, and that one was very heavy, very matte, and the shades were very yellow. And with the Charlotte Tilbury complexion products, I found everything was very warm yellow. For me, having more neutral leaning cool tone skin, I could just never really get a good shade matte. Those were quick to be decluttered from my collection. Foundation I'm using today would almost be like a hybrid of the original Light Wonder foundation and her most recent Beautiful Skin foundation. And the one I'm using today is an old favorite of mine. This is the Givenchy Prisme Libre Skin Caring Glow Foundation. I have the shade 1-C105. This is a very similar glowy foundation with more, I would say, light to buildable medium coverage. Applying it with a sponge, you are going to shear it out. It's going to make it a little bit thinner on the skin, which is going to be more reminiscent of the Light Wonder or Light Wonder? I feel like that's what it was called. Except this is going to be able to build up a little bit more like the Beautiful Skin foundation, just not as yellow and not quite as thick and greasy. I tried a sample of that, which I think Nordstrom's still around. They're in the process of closing their stores stores and ending their business reign here in Canada. So that's unfortunate. When the foundation launched, the SA I worked with at Nordstrom, she sent me a few samples of the beautiful skin, and she was one of the best SAs I have ever worked with. She knew I was in lighter end, so I think she sent me a sample of shades like 1 through 6. Most of them were too dark for me, but I was able to try them and figure out if something worked for me. Unfortunately, none of them worked for me. That's kind of expected because Charlotte Tilbury's brand as a whole tends to run more on the warm side. And this Givenchy foundation is so lovely. The Givenchy Please Leave foundation. So next, if I was creating a Charlotte Tilbury look, I would use the under eye corrector, which I think is the Magic Vanish Corrector. I think I threw it away, or I left it in Virginia, or it could have possibly been thrown away in Virginia because that was something I really enjoyed and I traveled with. I just can't find it anywhere. In lieu of that, I'm going to use my new favorite color correcting product. This is the Bobbi Brown Skin Corrector Stick in Light Bisque. And Bobbi Brown is one of the first brands I think of when I think about correcting products. When I first started makeup, I was building up my freelance makeup artist kit. It was hard to find a range of foundations or concealers that would work for a wider range of skin tones without having to buy a full range that would weigh down my kit or something that was just too expensive that I would later decant. So at the very beginning of my makeup kit, I had a lot of MAC because that's who I worked for. And then for more coverage, I used Estee Lauder's Double Wear Light. When I started making more money off jobs, doing a lot more bridal, and then getting into doing some TV work, I began using the Bobbi Brown University palette, the BBU palette. And once I was stick foundation, the other side was her concealers and correctors. So Bobbi Brown for me is like the original corrector brand. This stick corrector is beautiful. And to be honest, I prefer it over the Charlotte Tilbury. The Charlotte Tilbury is really good. Where the Bobbi Brown comes in the stick format, the Charlotte Tilbury came in a small rose gold compact, very reminiscent of the powder. And that either came in 3 or 4 shades. Before I move on to doing any type of concealer, I want to add a little bit of shape and structure to my face with my liquid cream products. This is where we get more into the products from Charlotte Tilbury that are very popular. So right now, her Beauty Light Wand or Beauty Contour Wands are very popular. I used to have them. If you go back and look at my Declutter series, which was, oh my goodness, that was the end of 2021 when my channel first began. Those are a little bit older, but I decluttered a lot of Charlotte Tilbury because things were too warm and they just really didn't sit well on my skin. The shade that I would be using from Charlotte is her Hollywood Contour one in the fair medium shade. The texture wasn't my favorite. The color was also a little too warm for me to use as a contour. So I'm going to use this one from Fenty. This is the Fenty Cheeks Out Freestyle Cream Bronzer in the shade 01 Amber. And I'm going to use a IT Cosmetics. This is an IT brush for Ulta, and it's their large foundation brush. I just like this for painting on contour easily. So after I've got that initial belt on, I just like to use my brush and blend. This is something else I prefer with the Fenty cream versus the Charlotte Tilbury Beauty Light one. I find these have a little bit more of a transparency, and when you are working with liquid or cream contours on top of your foundation, translucency is very, very helpful as it's easier to blend because contours that have a lot of opacity to them that you put on top, think something like the classic like Anastasia Beverly Hills cream contour and highlight palettes, or the KVD Shade and Light cream palette. Those had a lot more opacity to them, and trying to blend them on top of your foundation, even when I was still working as a freelance makeup artist, they were hard to blend, and if you use too much, good luck. The Fenty one has a nice sheerness to it, which is easy to blend out, and the Charlotte Tilbury, if you used it sparingly, very, very sparingly. So for me, the way I would generally use it is 1 dot on each side of the face, and then 1 dot on each side of the forehead with 1 in the middle, and then blend out very quickly. And sometimes I would even blend with a damp beauty sponge as that would lift off some of the product. This is where you could use the Beauty Light Wand in the original Spotlight shade, which is a really beautiful, slightly warm toned champagne gold color. Or I noticed on her website, she has 2 little chubby stick highlights. I've never tried them, never swatched them, never seen them in store, so don't really know anything about them. For this, I'm gonna use my favorite cream highlight. This is from IT Cosmetics. This is the Hello Light Creme Anti-Aging Radiance Cream Luminizer in the shade Radiance. Very long name. When I checked this morning, it is still available on the It Cosmetics Canadian as well as the American website. I love this. It was a staple in my kit. I have repurchased this at least 4 or 5 times. And if you are someone who feels like cream highlight just emphasizes everything you do not want it to emphasize, try to get your hands on this. It doesn't matter if you have more warm tone skin, cool tone skin, or you're right in the middle and you're pretty neutral. This has enough of a translucency to the formula to go on pretty sheer, so it's very adaptable. And it has this texture that is just very smoothing and very flattering. So even right through here where I have crow's feet, it's been about 7 months since I last had my Botox done. I've not been here in Toronto very often, so it's a little bit harder for me to get to those appointments, but when things settle down, I will get my Botox refreshed. Even right there where I do crease and crinkle, you can see when I smile it crinkles right there, but when I stop smiling, it goes back. This was my favorite product for my bridal kit, especially for mother of the bride, because you can give that glow that makes the mother of the bride glow with the same glow that you would give a bride, except it's just a little bit more flattering. It's very smoothing, and in pictures it is stunning. So Charlotte Tilbury has her new, I believe it's also called the Beautiful Skin Concealer. I've not tried that. I swatched a few shades in Sephora and the shades were just once again very yellow or very peach. Something I like to do is if I'm unsure about a concealer, I'll take a disposable doe foot applicator, swatch it on my hand, and always test things right here in the web of the thumb and the index finger, because there tends to be more creases, more texture. So if you apply a little bit of a product there, let it dry down, and if it looks overly textured compared to the side without anything on it, then that's normally my sign to skip it, because if we're trying to make things look smoother and like you're putting your best self forward, you don't want a product that's going to emphasize creases and texture. The new Charlotte Tilbury concealer was just a no-go for me. I did like her concealer formula in the very beginning when it was like a twist-up brush applicator, like the Yves Saint Laurent Touche Éclat lovely concealer, but that was discontinued for the one that came with a twist-up. Is that the Magic Away concealer? It had like a little sponge on the end, like the Maybelline Age Rewind. And there was another one that was like a corrector on one side and an eye serum on the other. That was really lovely. I am using my current favorite concealer for adding coverage, Huda Beauty Faux Filter Luminous Matte Concealer, or just Faux Filter Concealer, and I have shade 1.5B Yogurt Drops. And this is such a stunning formula because it does blend down to a natural matte finish that has a little bit of a luminosity. Luminous and matte kind of contradict each other in my mind, so I say it creates luminosity from evening out the tone so light can reflect off it a little bit more easily, because when something is more of a uniform tone, it can reflect light instead of having points of lightness and darkness that kind of absorb and reflect light at the same time. It just makes things look a little bit smoother through evening everything out. Anything I have left on my brush, I'm just going to run around my nose, get rid of any redness. Like I've already alluded to, Charlotte Tilbury colors are quite warm, so if I do not take the time to conceal and neutralize any unwanted redness, then it will show up later when I don't want it to. On my chin, I have a little bit of a breakup that's healing, so I'm gonna apply a little bit of concealer there, just a pinch on the other side just to even it out, a little bit here. I'm gonna switch over to the large brush that I use to apply my highlight and contour cream to blend those. I'm applying it to larger areas, so I don't really need it to be as precise, so I don't really feel the need to use that small BK Beauty brush. Here at my desk, I have this Charlotte Tilbury, what is this called? Airbrush Flawless Finish Skin Perfecting Micro Powder, shade 1 Fair, and mine is empty. I panned this a few years ago, but the mirror's really nice, the compact's nice, so I've hung on to that. That being said, it wasn't one of my favorite powders. It took me a long time to go through, and I found if you apply slightly too much, it gets very heavy very quickly. If you're very oily, where the formula does have a waxy base to it, which helps give that smoothing, filtered like quality, it can look a little heavy and a little kind of cakey from the oil and powder meshing with the oilless skin. Just, it's not the prettiest powder in my opinion. I'm gonna use one in a very similar rose gold finished compact. This is the LYS Triple Fix Translucent Setting Powder in the shade shade Resilience, which is translucent. And I'm gonna use the Real Techniques setting brush. Use my finger just to press out under my eyes. And then I'm gonna use this just to set under. Anything's left, I'm gonna run around the nose. Now I'm gonna switch to the BK Beauty number 102. This is the large powder brush. And I'm gonna use this with that powder just to set the rest of my face, because I am going to be using powder products now. And since this foundation has a little bit more of a glow, I wanna make sure it's set down so that way nothing sticks or skips. Let's get a little bit of something on the eyes. And we are gonna be applying our first Pillow Talk product. Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize in the shade Pillow Talk. Neutral muted pink shade. Pick up a little bit of the Pillow Talk cream eyeshadow and wash that right over my eyelid. Eyes to Mesmerize in Pillow Talk for me is quite an interesting product, because depending on your skin tone and the tone of your eyes, this color can either be more warm or more cool toned, as it is quite neutral. My eyelids are thin. I'm quite fair toned, so my eyelids are a little reddish purple. This color applied to my eyelids helps to unify the natural discoloration that I have and makes it feel more intentional. Becomes almost like a no makeup eyeshadow. It's like taking the natural coloration of my eyelid and making it something more attractive and more intentional that creates a little bit more of a shapely character to the eyes. Pillow Talk came out. The other shade that was released is the shade called Walk of No Shame. This is a rusty orange eyeshadow, and it's skipping my mind. I cannot remember if I used this in my warm true autumn makeup tutorial. I love this color so much, this rusty orange color, but it does not look good on me. I can make it work by throwing a lot of other stuff at it, but if I'm doing a more warm toned look like I was doing for that warm true autumn look, this just, it takes over and it overwhelms me, and it's very intense and it's not very flattering. So I might see if, you know, someone like my mother or my sister-in-law want this. And the other shade in the Eyes to Mesmerize I have is the shade Oyster Pearl, which if I'm not mistaken, this used to be called Marie Antoinette. And this is a really beautiful champagne bronze. So it's more of a champagne bronze tone with a more neutral to cool, muted, murky tone to it. It's really, really pretty. This is something I have to use in a look coming up soon because it is so pretty. Pillow Talk Multi Glow Beautifying All Over Glow Highlighter in the shade Romance Light came out in the Pillow Talk Dreams collection. And if I'm not mistaken, the Pillow Talk Dream collection was a product of 2022. You have a light white gold, you have more of a rose gold, a copper, and then more of a mauve. You've got to be careful, at least I do, because it's not the easiest color. So I mostly focus on the perimeter and pick up a little bit of the white gold a little bit more, use a light hand and apply it on the top of my cheek, blend back. And as you can see on this side, if the light hits it, I get a little bit of a glow. The side without the highlight shows up a little bit more. So if I really want to get the glow effect, I mostly just focus my brush into the pale white shade and apply that. The texture is not as smooth as I would like it to be. If you get too heavy-handed, your brush is too dense, it can emphasize texture and unwanted details on the skin, but limited edition, you can't get it anymore. So there are things that I'm going to talk about in a video that I'm going to record tomorrow, which is going to, I'll tell you a little bit more later, but there will be alternatives to this that you can get easily and they're more affordable. Now from Charlotte Tilbury's range, you have her, I think it's Hollywood Contour Dew, I don't know, it's like powder bronzer and the powder highlight. I used to have that. I've actually had it twice and decluttered it both times, and it's just not a product that works for me. Bronzer for my skin tone that works a little bit better, and I prefer the formula much more. This is the Laura Geller Baked Bronze and Brighten in the shade Fair, which is a really beautiful neutral rosy bronzer, perfect for people with a fair to light skin tone with more neutral cool tones, or people who tend to turn more of a red pink shade when they get tan or or a burn like me. I'm just gonna apply it a little bit higher on the cheek, pull it into the forehead, a little bit nose and chin, and that's it for bronzer. The other Charlotte Tilbury bronzer is the Airbrush Flawless Bronzer that comes in those large compacts. I used to have shade 1, but for me, that was almost too light and it was very, very yellow. So I ended up passing that on to a friend and she loved it. But for me, it was not something it was wowed enough by. Shade 2 was a better match. Shade 2 has a little bit more neutrality. It's a little bit darker, but it's just not something I felt like I needed because there's other bronzers I like that are more affordable. So I skipped on that one. Charlotte Tilbury product I love. Sheet to sheet blushers. The first one I'm going to use today is Love Glow blush. Charlotte Tilbury blushes. She has her kind of signature swish and pop application. I am going to use my IT Cosmetics Heavily Luxe French Boutique Blush Brush, and you are supposed to swish around the perimeter. So within Love Glow, it is a apricot pink that is more neutral, leaning warm. I'm going to swish that from the inner portion right over. You can see that's almost like a peachy highlight on my skin tone. If you build it up, you can get a little bit more of the color. It's a quite sheer shade. It's very, very pretty though. And then you have the center shade, which is a pop. You were supposed to pop that color right on the apple of the cheek. I'm gonna pop it a little bit more forward because I'm using this more so like an expanding shade and to counteract the next Charlotte Tilbury blush we were gonna use. So this blush, from the ones I've seen and tried out, does have a little bit more neutrality because you've got one shade that's warmer, one shade that's more cool tone, so they create more of a neutral tone. But on me, it doesn't really show up. It's pretty. I like it for those kind of no blush days. The next shade I have is the original Pillow Talk shade. So this one's a little bit different. So here you have the blusher shade on the outer perimeter and you have more of a highlight shade in the middle. I just mix these two shades together. I'm gonna use the same IT Cosmetics brush blush. My thing with this shade is I'm gonna apply it here in the middle of my cheek. It's like a rosy terracotta, and it does this thing where it makes the whites of my eyes start looking yellow because it's just not a great shade. And that's something with the Charlotte Tilbury range. I mentioned earlier with her complexion products, they run very, very warm in undertone. And just with the product line in general, it all runs very warm and orangey, which is a big reason after the holiday 2021 collection where the eyeshadow quads came in that really beautiful mother of pearl finish, I just stopped buying from the brand because everything is just very warm toned and I struggle with warm tones. I have really gotten into seasonal color analysis. It's become a big part of my YouTube channel and I fall into the light summer category. And light summer is a season that is more neutral to cool undertone. It has higher influences of white brightness, or it has a higher value of white, which creates a brightness. Most of Charlotte Tilbury's range is a little bit more muted and more on the neutral to warm side of things. The Pillow Talk range is very neutral warm. So if you're gonna put Pillow Talk into a seasonal color analysis palette, this would be ideal for your soft muted summers and your soft muted autumns. And I would say this could even do pretty well as a natural no makeup blush for a warm true autumn. It's pretty rusty on my skin tone. In theory, this would also work for the spring color palettes, but it's quite muted. It has a little bit more of a gray undertone to it, especially if you don't use the middle highlight shade. And with that coming into play, it's not going to really give the spring color palette the brightness because they are a high value season. That means there's a high influence of white and yellow undertones, which makes them appear bright. It gives them this almost like neon quality that gives them more of an illuminance. And this is just a little bit more muted. It's a little bit more subdued. It could work, but it's not going to really make the cheeks come alive. Is the Charlotte Tilbury Lip Cheat in the shade Pillow Talk. I use this pencil quite a bit. I began using Charlotte Tilbury's Pillow Talk it was either 2017 or 2018, and I've used about one a year since I first began purchasing it, and it's just a really beautiful neutral warm undertone pencil. Now for the most part, I would agree that the Charlotte Tilbury original Pillow Talk Lip Cheat is pretty universal. Again, I feel like it's best suited for soft muted summer or soft muted autumn, autumn. However, if someone like a deep dark winter or deep dark autumn want a little bit more of a subdued nude lip color to go with more of like an intense smoky eye, this could be a great color option. And I feel like someone like me who is a light summer, you can make this work. It's going to create a little bit more of a smoky nude lip. It's not going to have that vibrancy that the light summer or the light spring color palettes really thrive in. So if you're wearing an eye or a cheek color that's just really poppy and really bright, you could use something like this to tone it down, create an illusion of it receding a bit and being a little bit softer. It's not going to be as much of a statement. It's just very much kind of in the background. It's not competing. It's not taking attention away. Bright winter, bright spring, it's really dependent on the person's overall hair color, skin tone, eye color, and the way they wear the rest of their makeup. Like one of my friends who is a bright winter, she said the Pillow Talk range just doesn't work for her. The colors just don't really look right with her skin tone and coloring. That's where the bright winter, bright springs need to be careful. This might not give you enough contrast to look lively and part of the cohesive look. It might just feel kind of bland. And I would say this is a big no-no for your true winters and true summers. It just, there's too much warmth in it for it to work well for those color palettes. Of course, you can wear it if it makes you feel good, but if you want to stay in a technically correct look for the seasonal color palettes, this is appear too warm and it's gonna look very out of place on the face. Charlotte Tilbury Matte Revolution lipstick in the shade Pillow Talk. Here is the Matte Revolution lipstick. This feels just a little bit more warmer than the lipstick. And if you look at this, like what it does to my teeth, like I whiten my teeth, I take the time to just make them look nice and bright. And here they feel very kind of yellow and dull, and just even with the rest of my skin tone, looking at my hands and things like that, it just feels very dull, very lackluster, and I feel very drained. I've had this for just over a year now. It doesn't spark that excitement. I don't feel like it just looks that great on my skin. There's other colors that look better for my skin tone that we'll talk about in a subsequent video, which is where I want to recreate the Pillow Talk look but using more cool tone shades, because this is supposed to be a universally flattering pink nude makeup look that I don't feel like is universally flattering because it's very warm tone. For some of us, that's really hard to pull off. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about dupes and alternative products in that video that are more cool tone friendly. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. That should be fairly soon. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Collagen Lip Bath in the shade Pillow Talk, Charlotte Tilbury's Lip Plumper. It has this heart-shaped applicator, which I don't feel like really picks up a lot of product. I don't know why I purchased this because I don't really use lip plumpers. I get my lips filled, and I don't feel like there's really a need for me to have lip filler and use a lip plumper. I mean, a lot of people do. It's personal preference. I've got my lips to the size where I like them, so I don't really want to make them look bigger than they already are. It's almost like somewhere between a muted salmon pink and more of a clay terracotta pink. It's just, it's kind of meh, but we'll leave it on because this is part of the Pillow Talk look. So here is our Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Lip Cheat Pillow Talk Matte Revolution lipstick and Pillow Talk Lip Collagen Bath Lip Gloss. Move into one of the Charlotte Tilbury products that set the makeup world a frenzy. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Luxury Eye Palette in the shade Pillow Talk. And here you have 4 shades. So you have your all over, you'll have your crease defining shade, you'll have an intensifier, and then your pop shade. Much like the Charlotte Tilbury look suggests, I'm gonna start with the top left shade, which is called number 1 Prime. I just always used it more as a lid shade. It does have a little bit of a light reflect, so I kind of take it up to my socket and don't extend. It's a little bit more of a muted champagne. It is a little bit more on that rose gold side of champagne. Instead of being more of like a pink rose gold, it almost feels like a brassy rose gold. It's workable. Like with the rest of the look, it feels cohesive. If I try to wear this with my normal style of makeup where my blusher and my lip color are a little bit cooler, this shade pulls very, very orange. The brush I just used, by the way, is the BK Beauty A501. Now I'm gonna use the BK Beauty A502, and I'm gonna move one shade over to this more kind of tea rose peach shade, and this is the shade number 2, and it's almost like a pink clay color. This is where it starts making my eyes look it makes my eyes look quite green. So it kind of counteracts the cooler aspects of my eye and really pulls out the golden flecked into the center of the eye, as well as more of this foresty green aspect of my eyes, which is normally not there. Normally my eyes take on more of a deeper blue-green color, but when I add these warm colors, it makes the whites of my eyes look a little bit more yellow, and it makes my eye color take on more of a yellow green. It's almost like a more warm yellow pine green color. Shade number 3, which is more of a fawn chocolate brown. And for that, I'm gonna use the BK Beauty A504. This is what Charlotte Tilbury refers to as a smoke shade. So this would be your smoky definer shade. So I'm gonna use this in the outer corner of my eye. And once I have less product in my brush, I'm going to start wiggling it into my crease. And I'm gonna take it just past the center of my eye line. Take a little bit more and wiggle this into the outer corner of my lower eye, or of my upper lash line. So for me, even right there, this is starting just to feel very muddy. It's one of those palettes that looks so beautiful on so many people. When you're working on someone who doesn't have the ideal coloring for this palette, this quad of colors, I feel like will look best on someone with light to medium skin with more neutral to warm skin tone. And if they have more of that more warm blue or the azure eye color, it's going to look stunning because the orangey tones in this eyes, and this is going to contrast the blue and really make the blue eyes stand out. If you notice in a lot of the Pillow Talk imagery, the lighter skin models have blue eyes because these colors are going to really complement the eyes and make the eye colors just really pop. Take some of the smoke shade just under the lower lash line. I don't want to be too precise. I'm going to keep it just away from the lash line itself because I'm gonna go back and add something there in just a moment. Now I'm gonna go back to the BK Beauty A502. I'm gonna pick up more of the number 2 shade Enhance, which is that tea rose color, and I'm going to buff it out. And now I'm gonna take the BK Beauty A503. This is clean, no additional product. So this is a clean brush I have not used yet, and I'm gonna use this to blend on the perimeter of the shadow, just really blend and buff out. Since these shades, when they kind of mix together, and that's mostly shades 2 and 3, so the tea rose and the warm chocolate color, when they mix together they become a little bit muddy. So I am just going to blend and sheer out that color. I mean, it's already muddy, so by blending and pulling them out, it's gonna make the muddiness feel a little bit more intentional and give me a little bit more of a color gradation that I can work with that's not going to feel so stark and so bruisey around my eyes. Shade number 4, which is a pop shade, or some people refer to these as the celestial shades. These, I'm just using my finger right over the middle of the eye. A lot of people love the Charlotte Tilbury celestial or pop shade because they feel like they're very smoothing. For me though, if I look at the side with that shimmer shade versus the side without, I can see all the fine lines and texture that I normally don't see. When you're using a matte or metallic shade, something that's going to add a light reflecting property, it is very common to emphasize texture because now you are applying shimmer particles, which are going to emphasize and reflect light. Therefore, they are going to show off textural irregularities. Anything left, I'm gonna run right under my eye. Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk eyeliner, warm burgundy shade. Apply this at my upper lash line. Now that I've got that pencil on, I'm just gonna use my small brush just to softly smudge. This is not my best eyeliner day I've ever had, but we're gonna go with it. So up next, I'm gonna apply mascara. I've had samples of the full fat lashes. It's not one of my favorites. And then I had a full size Pillow Talk push-up lashes, which was an interesting mascara. My issue is it transferred and smudged, and that's an issue I have with a lot of mascara formulas. I did notice Charlotte Tilbury recently came up with a Pillow Talk shade in the push-up lashes, so it's a little bit more of a burgundy chocolate shade. So the mascara I'm going to use today is the Clinique Lash Power Mascara Long Wearing Formula in the shade 04 Dark Chocolate. I do not know with this eyeliner if you'll be able to see my lashes, but I don't know, can you see that at all? With the mascara, without the mascara? I used the Clinique Lash Power Mascara years and years ago, and I have been wanting to try it, and now I finally am, and oh my goodness, I have not had a mascara look this good in such a long time. This is beautiful. So, during the Sephora sale, I was very tempted to purchase my first Charlotte Tilbury product in a while, and that was her Pillow Talk matte blush wands, specifically the shade Pink Pop, because packaging, what I saw, it looked like this really beautiful light hued pink with a stronger white base. So I went in store, swatched it, and it was like an electric orange pink. It would be beautiful for either a bright spring or a light spring because it's more of a warm tone pink with a nice brightness to it. For me, it was a little too warm and it looked orange. Something I have in my collection that's very similar that I enjoy a lot. This is the Essence Baby Got Blush in the shade, I think it's called Tickle Me Pink. Yes, 010 Tickle Me Pink. I'm gonna use my BK Beauty 107 flat blush brush, and just using a little bit of this, I'm gonna go right over top of the blush I already have on, the Pillow Talk and Love Glow blush. This is a little bit cooler. One thing to note about this does have a very strong synthetic watermelon scent. It's reminiscent of the smell of a watermelon Jolly Rancher. So if you do not like that smell, this might not be the best blusher for you. Now I look a little sunburned, but at least I don't look orange or as orange. I'm gonna take my beauty sponge that I applied my foundation with. I'm just gonna press over to soften that down. And now we are gonna finish off with one of my favorite Charlotte Tilbury products. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless mini size that I take with me in my bag when I travel. And then I have a large size that lives here at my desk. I find it's best to do 1, 2, 3, and let it dry down, and you are good to go. Final look using mostly Charlotte Tilbury products, mostly the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk products. Is this worth the hype? Is it worth your money? Overall, that is your personal preference. I feel like it is not quite as universally flattering as the marketing makes it seem, because it is quite muted and it's quite warm. So already, if we look at in terms of seasonal color, that would pretty much knock out anyone in the winter or the summer categories, which would then cut the universal appeal down by at least 50%. So that doesn't make things feel the most universally flattering on me. I feel like we created something that's workable, but it's not a look that makes me feel my best. I feel very made up and I feel very orange. So for me, I don't really get into hype. Clearly, I fell into the hype in the past, but for me, now that I know the colors that work for me the best, it's not something I am as crazy about, and this makes me even more excited to record my video, which is going to be me creating a look like this, but using cooler toned products to help the 50% of people who this might not be the best look for. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have linked everything in the description box down below, both for US shoppers as well as Canadian shoppers for your convenience, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself wherever it is you are in the world. Bye, y'all.